Today we are reviewing the RSD Sergeant in fat mode. Now, fat bikes aren't just for riding in the snow. A lot of people like them for bike packing, touring, and desert terrain where there's a lot of sand. Has a different feel to it than a traditional hardtail. So we're going to continue our review in dirt now with the fat tires. Once again, these are Maxxis prototype tires. They are essentially an FBF 27.5 by 3.8. So they're, I mean, most fat bikes, if you're not familiar with them, are 5-inch wide tires. These aren't quite there. They're kind of in between plus tires and true fat tires. But this should still give us a pretty good expectation of what this bike can do. Even with the chain stays all the way slammed, there's clearance right there. I probably have a 1/4 inch of clearance, which won't be a problem in here. There's plenty of clearance in here and plenty down in the chainstay as well. These have got to be the world's heaviest fat tires, even though they're only 3.8s. I'd probably go with something less aggressive and lighter so it rolls a little faster. Got these at about 26 PSI. I'm gonna lower them real quick. Fat bikes can go as low as 4 or 5 PSI in the snow. Since there aren't rocks, they really squish out and flatten out. In the dirt, I don't like to run them that low. They just are way too squirmy and they get bouncy. They like get this rhythm going on them. Okay, I'll experiment through the day, but that's softer than I run my plus tires. This is probably 13 PSI, maybe 12 on that. And that's the real benefit of fat tires. There's no reason to buy fat tires if you're not going to air them down. I know a lot of people that run plus tires and run them at 30 PSI, and there's no benefit to that. The reason we run wider tires is so that we can air them down and get them to squish and conform to the terrain a little better. I'm guessing we're at 10 to 13, maybe 11 to 13. All right, that's definitely a smoother ride in these rocks. Especially with the rigid fork. That was a 1-foot drop in the rocks, pretty good. It's fun, the sound that big old fat tires make. There's so much grip. So for trail riding like this, oh, here's a little bit of mud. For trail riding like this, I don't feel the fat bike tires add a whole lot over a 3.0 plus tire. They really just add weight, which makes you more tired. I'm getting a tiny bit of self-steer with these tires like you typically do. It's a 2-foot drop. Yeah, solid bike. I like it. It does give you a little bit of cushion even compared to the plus tires on drops. But a lot of fat bike, when you run them low, they start to get self-steer, and there's so much mass rotating there, and maybe self-steer is not the right term. Man, traction is unreal. I am bouncing around a little more now. This is a pretty chunky section of trail. Self-steer, I feel, on fat bikes a good amount, but the slacker head angle, I feel, counteracts that. Ironically, it wants to keep it a little bit flatter. I've always wanted to try a fat bike with the middle child's geometry. Super short chain stays, like 64-degree head angle. I think that'd be so fun. You're not gonna win any races with your friends running big heavy tires like this, but it still carries that same sense of adventure, maybe even a little bit more than running the 3.0 plus tires. Traction's insane. It's not nearly as peppy as when I had the 3.0s on. These are big, heavy, meaty tires. And with so much rubber on the ground, I don't think you need as aggressive of a tread as these have. So this loses some of its peppiness that the 3.0 has. But in this format, this is a mule. Not as slow as a donkey, but it's no racehorse. It's still fun though. What a beautiful day. It's a little bit bouncier ride than the 3.0s as well, because I'm running them so low. You kind of get these oscillations on the terrain, and there's no rebound damping because it's just the tire doing all the work. Plenty of traction. That was fun. I feel the weight of these big old tires on the climbs and sprints, but it gets moving, it gets rolling. I personally think I prefer these 27.5 fat tires over 26 by 5.0, especially for trail riding. Snow's a different beast altogether because you want maximum flotation, but these feel less squirmy with less sidewall to me. And truth be told, this rides more similarly to the 3.0s than different. The main difference being just the weight of the tires. Not tons different otherwise. It does give you a lot of comfort having that big front tire, and it's cool to look down and see it and you feel like you could get through anything. But if I were blindfolded, aside from the weight of the tires, I honestly would have a hard time telling the difference between this and 3.0s aside from the tire pressure. I'm gonna head down to the wash, to the river, to ride some of the sand down there. See if we can unlock some of the benefits of these tires. It's pretty neat on big, technical, slow, grippy moves. You have so much grip. You can stick the tires in other places where it would normally be sliding. It still steers really well. You can lean the bike, steer like this. That's how I prefer to steer. Or you can steer keeping it upright and using the bars to steer. Kind of how bikes back in the early 2000s and late 90s steered. That's still how a lot of people ride, and boy, if that was one skill I could teach people, it'd be how to turn by leaning your bike and keeping the bars straight. I dropped the tires another 3 psi, so we're probably at 8 psi, maybe 9. And on regular trails, there's no advantage. This bike still encourages me to goof around though. I need that in a bike. That's one reason I don't ride cross-country race bikes. I like to goof around and play and have fun, and traditional fat bikes don't give me that. This is my first time riding the Maxxis FBF, fat bike DHF essentially. And I like the normal DHF fine. I love the DHR, I love the Assegai. I like the Dissector, but I don't love this tire. I feel it's too much, and it doesn't quite have the cornering that a real DHF would have, you know. I like the cornering knobs. I think I don't need the weight, and the weight is significant. But the traction is not significantly better than the 3.0 Schwalbe Knobby Nigs as far as high-speed cornering stuff like this. If anything, it doesn't corner quite as well. But that's not why you buy a fat bike, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning. All right, we're getting down close to the river, to the creek. Oh yeah. If you're riding a lot of this stuff, moon rock and sand and really loose dry sand like this, the fat tires really help, even more than plus tires. So let's get into explorer mode. To me, this is where fat bikes really come into their own. When you're exploring, especially if you're exploring cross country or you're in the desert like New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and there's sand and you still want to make progress, the fat tires really help. They just keep you rolling. If you like exploring like that and you don't care about a small weight penalty, it's a good way to go. Also, if you're loaded up bike packing and your bike's 50 pounds anyway, a little bit heavier tire is not going to be night and day difference. But it completely grips in deep loose sand. If I were riding a lot of this stuff, I'd be tempted to put the suspension fork back on. It's fun. It's just like a little tractor. It's like a little Willys Jeep. It just kind of crawls everywhere. It's been fun to try this bike with 3 or 4 different modes. Just goes to show how versatile this bike is. And I did it all without swapping any of the wheels. I'd love to try this as a 29 plus, but I completely get why RSD didn't do that. In my mind, this bike is for the person that wants 3 bikes in one without having to buy 3 different wheel sets or a whole bunch of different parts. I ran this in 3 different modes with the same wheels. So I wouldn't even need a snow wheel set. I can just throw these 3.8 to 4.0 fat tires onto the same rims I'm running with 27.5 by 3.0. And that saves an awful lot of money when you don't need more wheels. 29 plus would require a different wheel set. And at the end of the day, is another 3/4 of an inch tall wheel gonna make a world of a difference? No. It'd be fun to try. But if you just want to get out and ride your bike and stop thinking about components in your bike and all that, this bike definitely encourages you to do that. There's so many ways you can run this. And I think this bike will really be well suited to someone who's gonna have multiple ways to run it. If you just want it for the fat bike, I don't know that it's beneficial to have a super versatile bike like this where you could just get one fat bike exactly how you want it. Or if you just want one plus bike. But if you want the option to be able to swap it out or maybe throw on some big tires to do some, or snow biking, or you want to throw some slicks on it to commute, it is so versatile. And it really is like having multiple bikes in one. It does really well on sand. side hill sand is not easy. Oh cool, there's still ice on the river here. That's super cool. Yeah, that's significantly more flotation than 3.0s on the sand. Now it's time to climb. I'm gonna regret having these big old heavy tires. They're not that bad, but you're not gonna wanna do a cross country or enduro race, or even a bike packing race on these tires. They're just heavy. So if I were running it in fat bike mode, I'd get some 4.0s that were lightweight, that don't have quite such an aggressive tread. It does it, it still motors along a lot more sluggish than the 3.0s, especially the Schwalbe 3.0s, which are super light. No matter what tires are on this bike, it encourages me to just slow down and take it in. Definitely has a big adventure feeling to it. Love that aspect of this bike. It climbs so well with these tires, it's fun. You can wrap around the rock and just hang on. This is loose, very loose gravel with 1 to 2 inch size loose rocks. And it just tractors up it. There's no slipping of the wheel. Fat tires do have a place. Well, this concludes our ride of the RSD Sergeant on fat tires. Pretty cool to be able to run fat tires without having to change your wheel set or anything else on your frame. Or if you want to explore at slow speeds on gravel or sand, fat tires can do things that plus tires can't. For everything else, I feel like plus tires are much more suited for this bike and in general riding. But like I said, all this cost was the cost of the tires to throw it on and try it. Super fun if you want to have a bike that you can ride in the snow as well without having to change anything. All right, let's break down the review. Climbing, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Tons of traction. It can claw up stuff where you'd normally spin. The heavy tires make it sluggish, so you do get more tired. Cornering, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 with the fat tires as far as traditional trail riding like this. Playfulness, in all honesty, this is really close to the 3.0 Plus setup. Just a little bit slower rolling, a little bit more energy to get going. But it's still fun, but it can claw up stuff a little bit better. What a cool thing that you can just keep your stock wheel set and put fat tires on it and get snow capability and sand capability. For bike packing, I'd run the 3.0s. For most trail running, I'd run the 3.0s. But for snow biking, to be able to pop just tires on, that's a game changer for me. And it can make your 3-season bike a 4-season bike really easily. It can still be run single speed. You can adjust the chainstay length. I would love if it was even shorter chainstay, but I'm not sure that's possible. I'm a small guy, and the chainstay is longer than the reach for me, which means I feel like when I'm standing up, my body is further forward than back, so it's harder to lift it up, play around, whip it around. But it does mean when you're seated, it's really stable climbing. And when cornering too, that wheel's a little bit further back and it just wants to make sweeping corners a little bit more. Super fun that it's got that capability. I really like this fork. There's plenty of clearance in here. I like that you don't run the super wide spindle of a fat bike and that you've also got the narrower 157 mil Super Boost Plus rear hub and not the 190, I think it's 197. It's more playful than a traditional fat bike, which I like. I also like the 27.5 fat tires, whereas 26, the sidewall was so tall, it would get a lot flexier and squirmier. Now these are really stiff sidewalls, they're DHFs. So even with low pressure, they hold up well and they didn't fold or roll. And so I like that. So the 27.5 fat bike has lower sidewalls, so less squirm, but it's still got that wide tire patch, and I prefer that over 26. Stay tuned for my summary of everything and a final recap of this bike. There's a party in the mountains, and you're invited.